Hello everyone, this is me Abdullah Noman, and in this video we are going to start learning about something called testing. Now in one of my previous videos, if you remember, I said that I said that in the future I will be talking about these files here. Now these are actually called source sets. Alright, this is a source set, this is another source set, and this is another source set. And I said that in the future we are going to be learning about these source sets. I actually said that these files, and because at the time you wouldn't understand what is a source sets. Now right now I think you are experienced enough to understand that much. Now in this video we are going to be talking about these source sets, and these source sets are actually about testing. That is how when you want to test your Android application, that's when you use these files or source sets. All right, now in this video, in the beginning, I also want to clarify something. That is, this video is also about something called TDD, that is test driven development. All right, now basically testing, test driven development, all of these things are the same thing. And in short, what test driven development means is this. You see, when your Android application is already created and your Android application is maybe big and it has thousands of lines of code and it's already published in the Play Store, and then the users are using it, and then what happens is that you find a bug, or you find that some internal logics are not working according to your plan or exactly how you wanted to use it. Now then what you do, you bring it back and you open the code and go line by line, and you also debug also maybe, and then you do a lot of other stuff. But at this point, when your Android application is really big, it becomes really difficult to change, to modify, and to find the errors, because you see, especially for example, if you want to modify your Android application at at that point when it's big, it has become complex, then you know that an application, everything inside an code or project, basically inside an application, is dependent to something else at most of the time. So what happens is that when you want to change something, one logic, you have to change a lot of other logics also, a lot of other changes also, and that can take time, that can take money, that can be expensive. For example, imagine if Facebook Messenger or WhatsApp found some kind of error when they have actually published it in the market, and they have billions of users, and maybe on a certain day they actually find that okay, this is not working, and then they have to stop the app from bring the app from the market, or maybe stop it for a while. Then how costly is that? That's actually pretty costly. So the thing is this: when this thing happen and you want to change something after you have published or after you have developed your Android application, then it becomes very costly and time sensitive. So what you should do is that you should develop your Android application and test that Android application for possible scenarios at the very beginning, and this is what's called test driven development. That is testing and then developing. Okay, testing and then developing. All right, so that's about that. Now in Android technology, there are actually two kinds of testing. One is called the local unit testing, which is actually this source set with this one test, and there is this another one called instrumented testing, which is this one, and it has the name Android test. All right, okay, now I need to explain what are these. You see, the unit test, local unit test, is the test that you are going to be conducting when you want to check the internal logic, and when you don't need to test the Android framework. Basically, when you don't need an Android device or emulator to test your Android application, you just need the internal logic to be checked. In those cases, you are going to be using unit testing. And in other cases, or by the way, let me before I talk about other cases, I also let's talk a little bit more about local testing, which is when you use local testing, you use local testing when you can create fake objects or fake dependencies, basically fake objects. Basically, for example, some of your code and some of your logics might be dependent on some kind of object, some kind of object or class that you have created inside your coding. And there are and in situations when it's possible to create uh, fake objects, mock objects, to test your Android application. In those cases, you are going to be using local unit testing. And by the way, local unit testing is at the core of your test driven development. Basically, this is the testing method that you actually use while developing your Android application, and this is important. Now let's talk about the other one, which is, this is a new, by the way, this is a new program, and this is a created one that I actually have here, and this has a lot of methods, and this has a lot of code that we can actually test. And using this code and these methods, where I am going to actually show you exactly how to test your Android application. So that's about that. There are two projects here. Now let's just talk about this from here. Now we are talking about unit testing, and we have completed about like what unit testing is. Right now let's talk about instrumented testing. You see, what instrumented testing is this? When you need the Android framework, when you have access to the Android framework, that is when you have access to the Android emulator or Android device, real Android device, and then you want to test your Android application, that's when you use instrumented testing. And again, inside in instrumented testing, you had actually access to the Android framework. In local unit testing, you don't need access. You can have, but you don't need access to Android framework. You and your test, in case of local unit testing, your test actually runs inside the JVM, Java virtual machines only. So you don't need any Android emulator in case of local unit testing, and you will see exactly how does that works. Now in case of instrumented testing, you do want a device or emulator. Now why is that? Because this is the kind of testing that you will conduct when you need some kind of emulator or device. For example, when you want to check how your Android application is working, or the components of your Android application is working with other apps in your phone. If you want to check that there are some other apps, and you want to check that, okay, how is my application working, is it working correctly with other apps, or is it creating problems? In that case, you want to use instrumented testing. Or maybe you want to check the network status, or maybe some user interface testing. There is a testing inside, there is a kind of testing inside instrumented testing that is called UI testing or user interface testing. That is when you want to test how your app is reacting when the user is interacting with your Android application. Okay, so in all of these cases, you are going to be using instrumented testing. Now most of the testing in case of instrumented testing is done by using something called espresso. Okay, we are going to be learning about espresso in the future. Right now in this video, we are going to be learning about unit testing, local unit testing. Okay, and by the way, let me inform you that you might be wondering, you might be thinking that this is not important, maybe that is more important, the other one, instrumented testing, because that actually involves a real device. It's not true. Actually, when you are developing your Android application by using the method called test driven development, which is quite important, by the way, in those cases you definitely need local unit testing. All right, so that's about that.